Hey, stuffers! If the economy is a computer, someone just hit the factory reset button while chewing bubblegum. Alex here, and welcome back to Stuff with Alex. This story begins not with a whisper in a dimly lit back room, but with an open mic moment in a very exclusive mountain resort. It's about timing. Specifically, the terrifyingly perfect timing of an ambitious plan that was lying around, ready to go, just when the entire world caught a virus and simultaneously decided to shut down. The year is 2020. Pandemics are raging, supply chains are collapsing, and governments are frantically pumping trillions into the system just to keep the lights on. And right there in the midst of the chaos, the World Economic Forum, the WEF, steps onto the stage and says, "Don't worry, we have a name for this whole mess: the Great Reset." The stated goal isn't just to repair the damage, but to establish a new equilibrium among political, economic, social, and environmental systems toward common goals. Think about that for a second. The system is crashing hard. The global economy shrank by 4.9% in 2020, with the European Union suffering a terrifying 7.2% drop in GDP. Millions are unemployed, businesses are dying, yet the world's most influential thinkers and leaders weren't just focused on fixing the unemployment rate. They were ready with a comprehensive, long-term blueprint for reconstructing society. The sheer scope of this proposal, moving beyond mere recovery to fundamentally redefining capitalism itself, is what demands a deep dive. Were these highly influential individuals simply blessed with extraordinary foresight? Or were they merely waiting for the right catastrophic market failure to justify radical interventionist ideological changes? That is the foundational mystery of the Great Reset. Stuffers, hit that like button if you're already spiraling into the mystery, because we haven't even gotten to the part where they talk about you owning nothing yet. The official narrative surrounding the Great Reset positions the COVID-19 pandemic as the necessary shocks that exposed long-hidden systemic flaws. The devastation was severe and uneven. The losses were not uniform, hitting low-income earners, women, and youth particularly hard, and leading to a severe rise in poverty and inequality. The crisis exposed the precarious nature of employment and the deficiencies in health systems, alongside the disruption of education for over 1 billion students. Klaus Schwab, the founder and executive chairman of the WEF, argued that the long-term economic consequences of the pandemic would only exacerbate existing climate and social crises, making the need for a great reset of our social and economic systems far more urgent. The terminology itself is revealing. The initiative proposes to reinvent capitalism to create a more prosperous and just world. The idea is that the global economy, like a computer or mobile phone that malfunctions, needs to be restarted because it can no longer operate under its current parameters. This severe collapse and the subsequent economic scars justified an immediate call for simultaneous global management by all stakeholders. To achieve this systemic reset, the WEF initiative is guided by 3 core strategies designed to steer the global trajectory. Invest in people. This focus aims at preventing the crisis from triggering a sharp rise in inequality by investing in education, health, and robust social protection systems. Promote low-carbon growth. This is the environmental mandate, requiring a push toward climate neutrality through, for example, the rational allocation of public expenditure. Digital transformation. This strategy leverages the accelerating digitalization trends by expanding the use of e-government platforms to improve transparency and efficiency, and maximizing the use of remote working and distance learning. Examining the official documentation makes it clear that the pandemic served as the catalyst, not the root cause, for this proposed ideological overhaul. The underlying philosophy, a new wave of regulatory and interventionist theories moving capitalism away from laissez-faire, was merely waiting for the right moment. The COVID-19 crisis provided the necessary emergency mandate, the political justification to push through fundamental ideological changes that would have otherwise faced massive resistance. This approach reveals a profound operational necessity. Two of the strategic pillars, low-carbon growth and digital transformation, demand massive, coordinated infrastructural changes and shifts in consumer behavior that traditional, slow-moving governments struggle to achieve alone. To ensure climate goals are met via the rational allocation of public expenditure, the system must integrate centralized state goals with the agility and scale of corporate entities. This necessitates a fundamental shift in corporate governments, foreshadowing the need for stakeholder capitalism and the associated blurring of public and private mandates. The foundational economic shift proposed by the Great Reset is the transition from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. Shareholder capitalism, which defined the 20th century, focused narrowly on maximizing profits for the company's owners, often neglecting wider social and environmental costs. Stakeholder capitalism, by contrast, views companies as integral parts of a larger social fabric, requiring businesses to consider the interests of all stakeholders, employees, customers, suppliers, communities, and the environment, alongside those of the shareholders. Klaus Schwab maintains that this is a pragmatic move. Businesses perform better long-term when they meet these broader societal expectations, attracting top talent and earning consumer trust. However, this elevation of nebulous social goals over the singular, quantifiable objective of profit maximization creates a terrifying governance vacuum that allows for centralized power accumulation. The transition to stakeholder capitalism has generated intense criticism, primarily focused on the erosion of clear managerial accountability. The core conflict is that by removing the clear financial objective, immense subjective power is granted to the decision-maker, the executive or manager, to weigh competing interests. The main arguments against this transition include managerial opportunism. There is a significant risk that managers will use social goals such as ESG metrics to justify decisions or mask poor financial performance. Taxation without representation. When executives spend corporate funds on social ends, like reducing unemployment or stabilizing prices, it is seen as using shareholders' money for political goals, effectively bypassing democratic oversight. Erosion of fiduciary duty. The most significant structural flaw is the weakening of accountability. Critics argue that accountability to everyone means accountability to no one. This shift erodes managerial accountability to shareholders and weakens the fiduciary duty traditionally central to market capitalism. The functional implication of this ideological pivot is not decentralized benefit, but the immense concentration of power within the hands of corporate leadership and massive financial institutions. By abandoning the singular, measurable profit objective, the system empowers centralized elites to define success subjectively. This allows large asset managers, often through the mechanism of ESG initiatives, to impose their preferred social and political agendas onto corporations. This is the key structural implication. The shift to stakeholder governance sacrifices legal fiduciary duty for vague, politically charged social objectives. This creates a critical conduit by which political goals, particularly the demanding targets of low-carbon growth, can be translated directly into mandated corporate policy without the need for traditional legislative approval. The resulting legal and governance overhaul risks threatening both democratic accountability and free market capitalism itself. The WEF's forward-looking agenda, especially as outlined in Future Focus 2025, heavily emphasizes the necessity of the blue and green economies and nature-based solutions to address pressing climate change and biodiversity challenges. The scale of environmental finance required is profound, with an estimated need for over $700 billion a year simply to reverse the global biodiversity crisis. To achieve climate neutrality and sustainability goals, policies must be aligned to mitigate climate change, enable a circular economy, and reduce environmental pollution. This requires comprehensive, coordinated policy coherence across fiscal, economic, and trade bodies, and an end to contradictory incentives, such as the nearly 90% of annual farming subsidies that are currently deemed harmful. The strategy for achieving these massive goals hinges on a radical new conception of the state's role. The Future Focus 2025 report argues for bold government action to unleash private sector initiatives, shifting the public sector narrative from burdensome bureaucracy to market co-creator. This involves the state actively designing, financing through patient innovation financing, and scaling entirely new markets in areas aligned with the reset's objectives. This market creation process moves from design, research, and development through demonstration and experiments to market scale-up. This process suggests an intimate, high-stakes partnership. However, there is a historical warning. Public-private partnerships around innovation have often been too unbalanced, failing to fairly distribute the rewards of successful projects. The importance of this state-led market creation is magnified when considering the massive financial trajectory of the digital economy. Digital ecosystems are projected to represent more than $60 trillion in revenue by 2025. This juxtaposition of public design, the market co-creator government shouldering R&D risk and setting policy goals, and private execution, compliant corporations reaping the rewards of scaled government-designed markets, creates a corporate-state symbiosis. Compliant private entities enjoy the massively scaled government-designed profit streams, especially within the $60 trillion digital transition. This immense financial opportunity, coupled with the stringent need for global policy enforcement, e.g., Tracking climate compliance to ensure low-carbon growth necessitates advanced, real-time digital infrastructure. It suggests that digital tools are the only plausible way to monitor and manage the flows required for a global transition, linking the digital economy directly to the mechanisms of centralized financial control. It is entirely predictable that a plan of this magnitude, a systemic overhaul proposed by powerful, internationally coordinated, and often unelected elites, would generate massive distrust. Critical academic perspectives confirm this, noting that the idea of deliberately caused great resets and the associated control illusions nurtured by the WEF are complex initiatives that inevitably spur wild conspiracy theories. The Great Reset has become a fixture in modern conspiratorial thought, acting as a conspiracy smoothie that frequently blends with older narratives, including the New World Order and the UN's Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Common claims include the belief that the pandemic was engineered by a secret group to control the global economy, that economic lockdowns were intentional, or that a global elite seeks to abolish private property. The most emotionally resonant conspiracy claim revolves around private property, often summarized by the chilling phrase, "You'll own nothing." These claims gain significant traction because high-profile political leaders, including U.S. President Joe Biden, New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, publicly referred to the idea of a post-pandemic reset. When figures of immense power use the language of a reset, it validates the public fear that a coordinated plan is being implemented at the highest levels. The scale of the WEF's ambition, proposing a fundamental new equilibrium, is so large that it structurally generates intense public skepticism. The sheer audacity of the initiative makes the idea of a small, centralized group imposing its will intuitively believable to many. While these theories often become interwoven with extremist narratives and unverified claims, they highlight a real public concern about autonomy and centralized economic power. Drop your wildest non-dangerous theory in the comments. But remember, no matter how weird it gets, the fact that these plans are happening out in the open is often the strangest part of all. The real threat of the Great Reset is not overt, clumsy physical tyranny, but the elegant construction of an automated compliance system. The theory proposed here is that the Great Reset is engineered to create a financial obedience architecture. Its core capability is not physical constraint, economic velocity control. The centralized ability to instantly and granularly modulate or restrict a person's economic participation to enforce non-economic goals, such as climate compliance or social equity. Step-by-step mechanism, scientific coherence, the regulatory need, the why. The WEF advocates for a new wave of regulatory and interventionist theories to rapidly achieve specific climate neutrality goals. This necessitates managing consumption behaviors like high-carbon activities and investment flows in real time. Traditional methods like taxation are too slow, and physical enforcement is too costly and unpopular. The centralization mandate, the WHO. Stakeholder capitalism ensures that centralized managerial elites and financial institutions acting as ESG enforcers, delegate economic decision-making power to themselves. The state, acting as the market co-creator, designs the compliance system. This centralized structure requires digital tools capable of bypassing the decentralized, slow processes of democratic governance. The digital tool, the how. Central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, provide the necessary infrastructure. CBDCs are traceable, offer instant settlement, and are inherently programmable, allowing the issuer to embed conditional logic, like restrictions on spending. They are the perfect mechanism to integrate with the massive traceable $60 trillion digital ecosystem. The soft lockup, the result. The convergence of these three elements creates the FOA. If an individual's non-economic compliance score, be it a carbon footprint metric, health status, or political compliance status, the purity, infection, or pollution criteria mentioned in critical academia, triggers a regulatory penalty, the programmable currency can impose an instant, automated financial break. This includes restricting types of purchases, setting holding limits, or automatically collecting fines. Dissent is thus met not with physical force, but with automated and instant financial deactivation. This system is highly logical because it removes human negotiation and political debate from the enforcement loop, ensuring the new equilibrium is maintained by code. The technical feasibility of the Financial Obedience Architecture, FOA, is validated by the rapid synchronized global push for central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. Global regulatory harmonization is accelerating, with countries across Latin America and other regions advancing toward clearer frameworks influenced by international standards. Major central banks are deeply involved in technical evaluations. The Bank of England, for instance, has demonstrated that offline CBDC payments are technically feasible, addressing a key resilience concern. More importantly, the policy discussions confirm the practical reality of control. The bank is considering implementing holding limits for CBDCs, potentially between £10,000 and £20,000. While these limits are officially discussed as measures to prevent destabilization of the commercial banking system, the deeper implication for the FOA is that they prevent mass financial migration out of the regulated system. If large amounts of wealth must remain in commercial accounts, those accounts are perpetually subject to the regulatory leverage, ESG scores, compliance metrics, imposed by the stakeholder model. The limit ensures systemic reliance on the partnership between the state and regulated private finance, keeping the financial system firmly within the designed architecture of the reset. The most significant policy tension is the promise of privacy versus the requirement for control. Central bank officials often propose privacy protections, suggesting that neither the central bank nor the government would access personal transaction information. However, the core mandate of the Great Reset is to achieve specific real-time global policy objectives, such as enforcing low-carbon growth and resource allocation. CBDCs are inherently centralized ledgers designed for traceability and efficiency and enable smart contracts. To manage the economy and ensure compliance with global environmental policies, the system requires transactional transparency. If a CBDC is necessary to achieve global policy objectives, the promise of privacy must, by necessity, be secondary to the functional requirement of traceability, ensuring the data needed for the FOA remains accessible to the regulatory architecture. The systemic contradictions confirm that the technology of control is rapidly outpacing the promise of individual freedom. CBDC policy tensions, privacy versus control. Synthesizing the structural and financial elements reveals the political and human cost of the Great Reset. The core economic concern remains the profound erosion of accountability within the stakeholder model. Since accountability to everyone means accountability to no one, the lack of a single measurable metric allows the managerial class to become functionally immune to scrutiny regarding system failures. The convergence of the state as market co-creator, the regulatory interventionism of the Great Reset program, and the mechanism of the financial obedience architecture fundamentally redefined citizenship. When financial tools are used to enforce non-economic outcomes, for example, climate targets, economic participation transitions from being a right derived from political citizenship to a privilege granted by compliance status. This structural shift aligns precisely with academic warnings of a restoration scenario. This outcome suggests the emergence of new social strata determined by levels of purity, infection, or pollution, meaning one's compliance with social and health mandates. The neo-medieval prediction suggests a future where economic access and social mobility are dictated by one's measured adherence to the system's goals, managed and enforced by the synchronized financial sector. The danger is a quiet, automated conditioning of human behavior through financial control, a system designed to be so comprehensive and seamless that resistance is financially impossible. After diving deep into the technical blueprints and governance structures of the Great Reset, the overarching characteristic of this movement is structural hubris. The global problems faced by humanity are immense, but it demonstrates profound arrogance for any single centralized group to claim they possess the perfect centrally managed solution for all human complexity. The investigation has demonstrated that the architecture they propose, stakeholder capitalism, married to a financial obedience architecture, is structurally designed to bypass democratic accountability and mandate obedience. The goal of this comprehensive analysis is not to propagate fear, but to foster vigilance. Vigilance requires not only resisting the sensationalized, unverified conspiracy theories, but actively scrutinizing the very real structural changes happening right out in the open. The accelerating feasibility of programmable currencies, the systematic erosion of corporate accountability, and the state's self-appointed role in designing and controlling the world's largest new markets. We must be skeptical of any system that offers perfect stability in exchange for absolute autonomy. For those who approach these topics with a grounding in faith, it is vital to remember the true nature of power. The fear of man, or the fear of any elite centralized body like the WEF, is a spiritual trap. All human systems, whether they're based on laissez-faire economics or centralized digital control, are temporary, flawed, and subject to rise and fall. True freedom is found not in avoiding the next human-made system, but in diligent awareness and placing ultimate hope outside the reach of any earthly economic forum or digital architecture. We must be sober and awake to the realities of our time. Therefore, let us not sleep as others do, but let us watch and be sober. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 6. Okay, thanks for watching. Peace out. Goodbye, guys.